Hello, my name's Daniel King and welcome to my play of the day from round 6 of the Istanbul Olympiad. At the start of the day, two teams were on 100%, Russia and Armenia, and that was the big clash of the day. And my play of the day comes from that match. It's the board 1 game between Vladimir Kramnik and Levon Aronian. Of course, two great chess players, rated currently number 2 Aronian and number 3 in the world Kramnik. So okay, let's see what happened. Kramnik had the white pieces and started very solidly with his usual d4. So far in the Olympiad he hasn't set the tournament on fire. He's been very solid on board 1, and he selects a very pragmatic continuation here. The exchange variation of the Slav. Now, this has a solid reputation, to put it mildly, not to say a drawish reputation, but of course white does have a minimal edge, and I think this was a very good play against Aronian, who's very creative, a very original player. So Kramnik is just kind of dampening down the play and hoping perhaps that Aronian will get frustrated. Let's see what happens. Okay, a6 is a very normal move to cover the b5 square, preventing knight b5 and in some cases bishop b5. Notice that the knight does not come out to f3. That would allow the bishop to g4, for example here, and then bishop g4. Black's problem is this bishop. If he can get it outside the pawn chain and then play bishop d6, he has no problems at all. But white is preventing that. Of course, white prevents the bishop coming to f5. Now, bishop g4 is possible here, but then white has the option either to play knight e2 or f3, and white is very slightly better in this position, but this is a reasonable way for black to play. But Aronian selects a more interesting move, g6, h3, that's to be able to play the knight to f3 and not allow bishop g4. And now bishop f5. So you can see that Aronian likes to complicate the position, likes to unbalance the position, and Kramnik declines to unbalance it. He could have exchanged on f5, but this is not a bad pawn structure for black. This clump of pawns in the middle is pretty strong, and black can sometimes use the semi-open g-file. But Kramnik did not want to go in for any complications at all. He just developed his pieces. So Aronian has exchanged off this, well, potentially bad bishop on c8. But maybe the bishop on g7 isn't so well placed. Well, we'll see about that in a minute. So all very regular so far. And Kramnik played rook fc1. White has a slight advantage here. This bishop is superior to the bishop on g7, and white is slightly better developed. You can see that here. The queen is out and the rook comes to the open file straight away. But it's not that serious for black. He's very solid, and well, Aronian plays pretty well from now on. Let's see, e6. Okay, solid move. That prepares actually later on for the bishop to come out here to neutralize white bishop. Knight a4 from Kramnik. Okay, looking to get in on these weakened squares. And knight e4 from Aronian. Good move, covering the c5 square. The knight comes in anyway, and this is exchanged off. And the rook's double. Okay, it's easy to see that white has a slice advantage here, but black is very solid indeed. a3 covers the b4 square, and bishop f8. So hitting the rook, which goes back, so, well, you can see it was necessary to play a3 to cover the b4 square. And now Aronian played f6. He could have exchanged off straight away with bishop d6, but I think he feared that after the exchange the knight would come to e5. Notice this pin is a bit annoying. And you know, maybe white is a little bit better here. So Aronian played very carefully with f6 to cover the e5 square. But, as we'll see later on, that weakens the 7th rank. Now that's not significant at the moment, but let's see what happens later. Knight d2. Well, there's not a lot that white can do in this position. Kramnik swings over the knight to get to the c5 square. And now I think Aronian should have played a5 here to play against that knight and reach a position like this. And I think it's very hard to break down black's position here. I'm not quite sure where white goes from this position. But instead, Aronian played bishop d6. Not a bad move. Okay, it's good to neutralise that bishop. But there are a few problems that black has here. You can see that knight would like to come into c5. And here Aronian played rook c7, which looks like a very natural move to cover b7 and to double on the c file. But it's a mistake. He should have played b6, which looks very unnatural. It prevents the knight coming into c5 or a5. It takes away the support from the knight on c6 and also leaves the a6 pawn vulnerable. But white's problem is it's actually very difficult to make progress here. You can try e4, but I think if black just remains solid, for instance, just recaptures with the pawn, the problem is this knight has to reroute. It takes a very long time for this knight to come back into play, and I don't see that white can get anywhere there. So I think b6 was the move, even though it looks very unnatural. Rook c7 appears strong, but look what happens. Okay, knight a5. Knight can't be taken, of course, because of the pin. Now rook c8, and here Kramnik broke in. I think Aronian probably thought that Kramnik would just exchange pieces and they'd agree a draw, but he overlooked knight b7. He was obviously lulled into a false sense of security, and after this piece sacrifice, amazingly, white is probably winning. Let's have a look what happens. Okay, rook is attacked, knight is attacked, so the rook has to come back to defend. But now this pin, or both these pins, are deadly. b4, threatening simply b5 to attack the knight, and the queen would be en prise, so the queen had to come back. So it looks as though black is going to be able to move the knight and everything's going to be fine, but look what happens. Queen b6, the knight still can't move because now there's too much firepower on the rook. And black cannot break free. Look what happens on, for example, rook b7. Rook takes knight, and now we can see the weakness of the 7th rank pays. We win the queen back, and white has 2 extra pawns. If the pawn had been on f7, the king could just hide on g7. There are other moves. For example, rook b8 would lose. This is a very nice sacrifice, actually. And there is no cover on the 7th rank again, and this is just a winning initiative. Rook c8 mate was threatened, and now the rooks are just deadly on the 7th rank. For example, here queen f8, rook takes, and rook here, and there's no defense to rook e8. So Aronian played queen e8. b5 happens. Well, if the knight moves, the rook is en prise on c7. Aronian tried a desperate tactic, but this lost. Okay, so he's still a piece up here, but after taking and queen c6, black is totally lost. If the queens are exchanged, then the pawn will just race home, nothing stopping it. So the queen had to move aside, and now the b pawn just goes home. Very simple moves, and white is winning. Queen a7, and now there's no defense to b8, queen, end of the game. So a shocking victory for Kramnik there. So Russia went 1 up. Aronian drew fairly quickly with Akopian. That left 2 games going. Sargsyan drew on bottom board with Yakovenko. So Russia was still leading, but Movsesian played a brilliant game and defeated Grishchuk, so the match ended 2-all. There are now 3 teams with 11 points. Russia, Armenia and Azerbaijan join them at the top. So the Olympiad is still wide open. Thanks for watching. See you later.